Fable is a franchise that needs no introduction to those of us who grew up in the Xbox and Xbox 360 generations, and yet it's been over a decade since the last original game in the series that wasn't either online only or cancelled in beta, and that was an on-rail shooter for Kinect that was, not great to say the least. The main franchise's blend of immersive features, absurdist British humor, all in the tight package of a 20-hour RPG, aim to provide a one-of-a-kind experience. And we're going back 20 years ago to the OG Fable, The Lost Chapters, to look back and answer some questions. How did it come to be? Does it still hold up? Should you play The Lost Chapters or Anniversary? But first, let's take a peek behind the curtain and see how the proverbial stew was made. Our story begins back in 1985. Yes, a whole 19 years before Fable was released, two brothers, Simon and Dean Carter, made a vow to each other that they would create a role-playing game like no other. This info is from developer diaries for the game, courtesy of Lionhead's now defunct site. These two, much like the player character in Fable, would hone their craft and meet others with the same passion, often creating loose ideas and interesting concept art for their dream game. The ingredients were being grown at this point. Simon and Dean were proper developers, where Dean had made games for the ZX Spectrum. Simon was splitting time between school and his job as an AI programmer at Bullfrog, working under our friend Peter Molyneux. Eventually, Simon would work as lead programmer on Dungeon Keeper. And as Molyneux left Bullfrog to form Lionhead, Simon himself would leave Bullfrog to create Big Blue Box Studios with his brother Dean and start to really focus on this dream project. The stock is finished and the water's boiling, and this metaphor is kind of falling apart. This led to the creation of a design document for a game titled Wishworld, a combat game where you can use your magical abilities to fight enemies on a barren world, and your abilities change and shape the world around you. They even compared it to a 3D Zelda with sandbox elements. This concept was in development, and you can see a lot of ideas that would make it into Fable. These screenshots show an early version of Orchard Farm and Bowerstone. The art style is of course different, but you can see the basis for what the game would become. As development for Wishworld stalled, the next evolution of this idea came from Peter Molyneux, which they called Merlin, where you played as one wizard but could be any archetype you want. Dean even mentioned that they tried to avoid this idea because they didn't want to cannibalize Black and White's morality system. But Peter gave his blessing, and the project evolved one more time into what was called Project Ego. During this time, Big Blue Box would merge with Lionhead, and Lionhead would then merge with Microsoft, and Fable would become a proper RPG developed exclusively for Microsoft's new console, the Xbox. Notably, this concept was initially touted as an open-world game by Molyneux, as you can tell by these nice-looking screenshots in their larger areas, but due to technical constraints, it had to be cut down to a more linear world. They would continue to be open and promote the game with trailers at E3 and a super informative and interesting development diaries written by Dean and Simon, which I will link in the description. Quotes range from informative on how they had to work on every element at once to make it work. One of the problems with working on an action simulation stealth 'em up RPG with a proprietary magic system is that all of these elements are pretty much equally important, to hilarious ones like this. Getting a game design from drunken pub conversation to supermarket shelf is a staggeringly difficult task. Anyone who says it isn't is lying, stupid, or ripped to the tits on methadone. Of course, this diary is not the only source of information on this heavily hyped up game. Our boy Peter Molyneux really started entering his prime during the hype cycle of Fable. Peter was really at his best here, promoting gimmicky, cool-sounding features like an acorn being able to fall from a tree and you can watch it as it grows into a full-size tree, or carving your initials and it being there 10 years later, as well as the ability to have children and play as them when your character dies. And the real heat check where he said Fable would be, and I quote, the greatest game ever. His gloating about unfinished features wouldn't go unnoticed in reviews and coverage like they did with Black and White, but we'll talk about the consequences of that a little later. Development would continue with a lot of hard work and a lot of hype building, and after 4 years of development, the quote-unquote greatest game of all time would come out on September 12th, 2004, and was a huge hit, selling over 400,000 copies in its first week. Of course, the version we're covering today is The Lost Chapters, which came out on October 18th of the following year, with a new ending, additional content, and several other improvements to the overall experience. This is Fable: The Lost Chapters. We're going to go through the full Fable experience, spoilers and all. But before that, let's take a look at the elements that stood out when I first played and still stand out now. First things first, the opening theme was written by Danny Elfman, and the rest of the music was written by black and white composer Russell Shaw, and it's all beautiful. The opening theme is epic and sweeping, truly setting the stage for the grand story about to take place, while Shaw builds off of those musical ideas and aesthetics by going out of his comfort zone by writing for orchestra. Each track perfectly sets the mood for each area, Oakvale being a favorite as it sets the tone for the light-hearted first part of the game while having that element of nostalgia when you return later in the story. While tracks for the darker areas sound appropriately menacing and the combat music it feels full of peril without being distracting. I've heard each track several times, and I never get sick of any of them. On the graphics side, each area looks distinct, and as a kid, and even now I found myself exploring the areas wanting to see what was past the borders because of how large it made the world feel, despite how constrained and small each area actually is. I think it technically still looks pretty good too. The PC port support for higher resolution helps a lot with this. The scale is on point and still striking to me once again, but that's probably some nostalgia talking. On the topic of the world being constrained, it is more of a game like Knights of the Old Republic with its explorable areas, but they aren't as wide open like an Elder Scrolls or most RPGs nowadays. What Fable at least attempts to do differently is allow you to have more impact on the world. You can kill most NPCs and you can buy all the properties in the town if you kill the owner. People will comment on your deeds, will celebrate you if you're good, and fear you if you've built up an evil reputation or have a scary appearance. Speaking of alignment and appearance, there's even a nice little menu that gives you all the stats on your hero from alignment, appearance, who you've killed, how much you've diddled. It's all here and is both useful and interesting to keep track of. All of these things makes it very immersive. You can even marry most NPCs in the game, no matter the gender. As a kid, I truly felt a part of this world, and even today that immersion still feels pretty solid, even if admittedly there is still some nostalgia on my part. I think Fable stays fresh with its cheeky humor and the interesting land of Albion and its interesting lore. In brief, Albion is a beautiful land of many climates, creatures, and people. It has lots of ancient structures littered from a more prosperous time, thousands of years prior. Now it is mainly made up of lawless regions in between safer city-states. The only resemblance of safety outside of these cities comes from heroes from the Hero Guild, which is a mercenary guild of powerful men and women who have advanced skill in at least one of strength, speed, or will, which is their version of magic. Now, we're going to go full speed ahead into the story and fill in the other pieces as they are relevant. Fable opens with a cinematic narrated by the Guildmaster, where he describes a boy who dreams of becoming a hero or a villain, and how he must eventually choose his destiny. He wakes up from this dream to his father saying that he has to get his sister Teresa a present for her birthday, and he'll reward him with a gold coin for doing a good deed around the town of Oakvale, which was always charming to me as an opening area. This is where your first morality choices get to be made. The morality system is cut and dry. You do good deeds, you get good points. You do mean things, you get bad points. If you fight this bully who's attacking this kid, you get good points, which you can double up on by giving the bear the kid was holding onto to this little girl who was missing it, or you can join the bully in beating up the kid and you get evil points. Either way, you progress. The other tasks you can do around the town include finding a man cheating on his wife who will pay you to shut up, or you can go tell his wife for good points. All with everyone sounding like they're straight out of a Monty Python film. I mean, listen to this salesman.
Stock available! Get your missing... Hello, lad.
Him saying, "Stock available," is burned into my brain. For most of the rest of the story, I will be doing a good playthrough. We will go through the most interesting evil choices later. Once you have enough gold, you buy the chocolates, talk to your sister who said she had some strange visions in her sleep, and what do you know? A man comes screaming that bandits are coming. After hiding, you find the village burning with the sky tainted with red from the flames and the sounds of villagers being murdered. You find your dead father, and a bandit comes to finish you off, only for you to be saved by a man named Maze, who says he's from the Heroes Guild and takes you away with him to join their ranks since everyone in your family is presumed dead. You go off to train where you meet Whisper, your rival and a fellow apprentice who is the little sister of a legendary hero, Thunder, who is a proud, snobbish, rude strongman. In your training, you will progressively age up and learn the basics of the game. The first being melee combat, which is deceptively simple, at least I treat it that way. You swing, block, and dodge. When you are blocked, you can parry, which can allow you to attack through an enemy's block, but will knock them down, preventing you from getting another swing in until they stand up. Which can make combat encounters slower, but is a lifesaver when you need a second to recover and heal. What is unique in Fable's melee system is the combat multiplier. The more swings you can get in without being hit, the higher your combat multiplier, which allows you to get exponentially more experience from encounters. This can result in you becoming very strong very quickly if you focus on this enough. You beat Whisper, Thunder and Whisper are the big mad, and you move on to further trials. The next thing you train on is the bow, which is pretty simple. Aim or lock onto an enemy, pull back, and hit. The harder you pull back, the more damage you will do. The last skill you learn in your basic training is Will. The only one you get by default is Lightning. You have a mana bar like most games with a magic system, and as you gain more experience, you can learn new spells and upgrade your other skills and attributes here at the Heroes Guild. You do a final trial where you fight Maze, and boom, you're officially a hero, and you can go take on your first of many quests. To take quests, you go to the guild map and pick up the quest card, and if you want more renown and money, you can take a boast, which of course I take the do it in your underwear because, I don't know, why not? It's kind of funny. Anyways, I'm tough and I kill the Wasp Queen, easy peasy. Everyone claps, you get some renown, and now Maze asks you to meet him in the big city in the area, Bowerstone. But first, I do what I always do and change my hero's name from Chicken Chaser, because everyone makes fun of you, even your Steam friends.
Chicken Chaser.
Remember, following the gold markers on your map will lead you to your quest objective.
What's taking the picnic?
In Bowerstone, Maze tells you that not only is your sister alive, but he could track her down. Here in Bowerstone, like all cities you visit, you can wander around town, buy new weapons, interact with townsfolk, and have annoying little girls following you incessantly trying to give you a quest.
Quick! Follow me! Follow me!
What's going on?
Bug off. Interacting with townsfolk is done through a system of expressions. Just because you're a mute doesn't mean you don't have a little personality to you.
Ha Hey. Yes!
How you doing today?
You can flirt, laugh, sneer, fart, and a number of other expressions as your renown increases, and you decide which morality you want to choose. I think it's an interesting idea, even if it can be mostly inconsequential outside of the flirting. More on that later. While Maze does more research on your sister, you can take on side quests like a hob killing contest at a farm where you must kill more of the little jerks than Whisper, who is a much bigger jerk, or you can just jump straight into the next quest where you must escort some traders through a cursed and nasty forest called Darkwood, where there are several attractions like a camp, a weird bordello, and a temple where you can sacrifice people for evil points. When you get there, you will face Hobbs, Wolverines, Balverines, and other nasties. You can escort an additional trader who was bitten, but unless you're very fast, he will turn into a Balverine before you can reach Barrow Fields, which is your destination. No biggie though, taking him is worth the good points you get. You meet your first troll right at the exit of Darkwood, and he is not too difficult. You can either fight with range or just attack head-on. No fight in Fable will be too difficult if you plan well and have enough supplies, even if your abilities are not up to snuff yet. Now that you've made it to Barrow Fields, you can buy supplies or go right into Oakvale, your hometown rebuilt after the bandit attack. You get a cutscene where our hero is traumatized after talking to the little girl from the beginning, all grown up. You find Mace here, and he tells you that he has more info on your sister, and says you must see a blind seeress that is staying with the king of bandits, Twinblade, who is the one who allegedly attacked Oakvale in the beginning. To get to his camp, you must sneak through a gate, which brings us to Fable's stealth mechanics, which are, not very good. In the rest of the game, it can be used to steal items from shops, but for the most part, it's not something you'll be doing very often. But they make the skill it's associated with more useful by also making items cheaper in shops. Once you manage to sneak past the gate, you learn that Twinblade is only letting people with full bandit uniforms in, so you go through this path and kill like 30 bandits while finding pieces of armor in chests all around. You know, instead of from the enemies who are wearing the armor, whatever. I'll play your silly little games, Lionhead. You get to the camp and you're allowed in due to your stunning bandit outfit. Now you're the basic bandit in the basic bandit part of the camp. And to get to the next level, you have to get a seal, which you can do in a couple of ways. But my path was gambling, baby. Play a little memory game, and it's yours. The level after that, I freed some captured women who are going to be quote-unquote entertainment for Twinblade, which distracted the guards to let me into his tent. You get to Twinblade's tent, and you realize that not only have you been expected, but the seeress you've been searching out for is your sister, who had her eyes gouged out by the bandits in the raid. Now you must fight Twinblade in a pretty easy fight once you learn to just get behind him. But I always love the crowd of NPCs surrounding you. It really adds to the immersion. Once you beat him, Teresa gives you some familial blood powers and provides a vision she had of you fighting in a sandy arena full of secrets, and of a difficult choice you will have to make one day. She warns you as she leaves, saying, "He finds you when you're sleeping and when the daylight fades." I like her characterization here. Her visions and blindness have caused her to have a distant personality, and her voice actor does a great job of selling this.
I've seen so many things. So much killing. So much dying.
You can leave Twinblade where he is, ashamed, or finish him off. He simultaneously begs for you to kill him and let him live. And it's very strange tonally, especially since if you spare him like I do, he'll send assassins after you randomly. After this, I decided to go do some more side quests before continuing further, and the structure of the quest got me thinking about how many ideas were iterated on from Black and White. The quest card system uses the same black and white, gold, and silver colors to designate which is a quest that progresses the story in gold, and one that is there as an optional yet still quality side content with silver. Then there's also bronze quests, being ones that you pick up outside of the guild. The morality system is much improved, offering multiple ways to finish quests that feel satisfying while still including the physical transformation and having that physical transformation reflect the way people talk to you. And that doesn't even mention the little technical things that come from having shared assets like sound effects, voice actors. The lightning is shared from the same lightning sound effect in Black and White. And the voice actor for the Guildmaster is the same that narrated the opening sequence in Black and White.
Are you a blessing or a curse? Good or evil? Play the small town of Oakvale, unchanged by time and untouched by the sword.
Now, unfortunately for Fable, the combat is not great. Melee is a lot of lock on and spam. Archery is underdeveloped, and you have to really run around and hope that an enemy doesn't catch you while you're charging your arrows, or you lose and your attacks are wimpy. The mana system is a good accessory to melee, but you can't really be purely a mage due to how fast you run out of mana, even at the maximum amount. The average fight in Fable will be a mob of enemies spread out over whatever area you're at. Most likely there will be a couple of lower health enemies with ranged weapons that will hit and knock you down, while a more numerous group of melee enemies surround you. Always go for the ranged enemies first to prevent getting knocked down every 5 seconds, and then just defeat the other ones by attacking and taking health potions, and congrats, you'll win pretty much every fight relatively easily with no effort, and it gets even easier if you focus more XP on willpowers like multi-strikes that turns one hit into several. Now, I don't find the combat compelling, and unfortunately, that's a lot of the game's missions with very little in the way of variety. It gets the job done, it's not terrible, but it turns most quests into a bit of a slog if you're not into it like I wasn't. I just wish it felt less stiff and that there was more variety and challenge to quests outside of the same combat situations. The only variation you get are escort missions, which is more of the same, but now you have a companion who does no damage and will fail you when they inevitably get stuck in the way. You can command them to stay back, but then you have to backtrack to get them to follow you again, and it's not a lot of fun. It's especially not a lot of fun in the Lost Chapters because of the horrible save system. If you enter a quest area and die at any point in most quests, you will go back to a save from right before you enter the quest area. There are 2 types of saves in this game. You can only do world saves, which is a normal save in between the quests. And if you want to save during the quest, you get an option for a hero save, which saves the experience you earn, but not your progress in a quest, which can be easily abused to get more and more and more experience. There were a couple of moments where I got lazy and died, or one of my escorts died during the quest, and I had to restart it, which is very frustrating, as sometimes these quests can be a little lengthy. It's frustrating, but luckily not an issue in the Anniversary Edition, which I'm sure most of you will play over the original, but it's worth noting. The story continues with May sending you to Witchwood, a heavily forested and Balverine-infested area, to find a, quote, friend of his called the Archaeologist who has been missing. He's hiding behind a demon door, and you must spell the demon door's name, which I already knew and did immediately to get in. The Archaeologist is furious that you found him because he's hiding from Jack of Blades, someone you've only heard about from a book at this point, but that book says that he is ancient, mysterious, and might not even be of this world, and that even the guild fears him. He says that you can take his journal, but it's not in the game anymore, so thanks, Lionhead, and you go back to the guild for your next quest, where you must defend Knothole Glade, a town in Witchwood, from Balverines, and kill a white Balverine, which is just a beefed up regular one that you need a silver augmentation on your weapons to kill. Augmentations are add-ons to your weapons that add new stat buffs, such as piercing ones, which pierce armor better, which is the most useful in my opinion, or fire, or as previously mentioned, silver. Once that's done, you get invited to the arena, a place that the greatest heroes compete in with the champions considered legends. You learn that Jack of Blades is offering a large reward and a meeting to whoever wins. And it is here that you fight wave after wave of enemies, and eventually Whisper joins you and you fight side by side until the last round, where Jack tells you to kill her to win. She says she refuses to kill you, but to put on a show, and you can decide to finish her off as an evil act or spare her for less money, which I chose to do. While talking about this game while playing it, I learned that most people tend to kill Whisper because she's so pompous and arrogant, and they don't allow much room for characterization, which I think that is a shame because there is a lot to work with here. She comes from a foreign land after it's wiped out, and Thunder sets these expectations upon her to be a great hero, and she just happens to be set up against someone with an ancient bloodline like you. You only get a kinder version of Whisper if you spare her. She'll meet you in Oakvale, tell you that she's leaving Albion and freeing yourself from the expectations of her brother to do more right in other parts of the world, which is cool. I wish they would give you more of that before the arena. You meet Lady Grey, the mayor of Bowerstone, who invites you to talk in the previously locked-off Bowerstone North. Thunder is still big mad that you're better than Whisper, and now you get to walk through the Hall of Heroes where Jack reveals to you that a former champion, Scarlet Robe, the Slayer of Balverines, is your mother.
And not only that, she is still alive. He further taunts you, saying he would love to reunite you and your sister with her. A cutscene then shows that your mother was left grievously wounded and your father nursed her back to health, where they fell in love and started a family. You leave the arena with a bunch of gold and a new mission to find your mother. Teresa requests to meet you and reveals that Jack of Blades was the one who ordered the pillaging of Oakvale because of his quest to get an ancient and powerful sword called the Sword of Aeons, which was used by the first Archon, William Black, to vanquish Jack from Albion thousands of years prior. To get this all-powerful sword, he needs the blood from the Archon's bloodline, which, as you may have guessed, you are a member of, which is why you're so cool and important and powerful. After this, Teresa goes into hiding, and I go into the best side quests of the game. The side quests in Fable are pretty good, and do what good side quests do, which is immerse you and endear you to the smaller aspects of the world. You can save a boy who's dying of disease, you can donate books to a school in Bowerstone, you can rescue a boy who's being sacrificed by fairies. There's lots to do, and the rewards are good and worthwhile, but my two favorite are these ones related to Lady Grey and a bordello. In Darkwood, you find a bordello led by a nasty old man, and here you can choose to pay for the services provided, or help the headmistress get the bordello from that nasty man by getting him so drunk that he snores the location of the deeds of the property. Now, my question is, why would having the deed give you the property? I don't really know, but Albion's legal system is messed up if it's that easy. And once you have the deed, you can either choose to continue the business as usual, or turn the bordello into a women's refuge, which is very nice. I like that there's no combat, no silly back and forth, just a fun little side quest confined to a tiny area. The one with Lady Grey is if you accept her invitation to Bowerstone North, she basically tries to get you to woo her, which requires black roses, finding a stolen necklace, and fighting thunder for her heart. But I'm a good dude and she's a foul lady. You learn from a man screaming in a jail cell nearby that Lady Grey has actually had something to do with her older sister's disappearance and begs you to investigate. When you go to Barrow Fields, you meet an ex-lover of her sister who says one day he went to call for her at her home and Lady Grey told her that she got suddenly ill and died. You go to their old house, fight some undead, and go to the basement to find her dead sister's corpse and a ghost who tells you to tell the world of her death. Lady Grey meets you there and tells you that she'll marry you and you can become Mayor of Bowerstone if you just keep your trap shut. I chose to tell everyone, and she disappears from the game and you become Mayor of Bowerstone, which basically has no real benefit other than some NPC dialogue and access to Bowerstone Manor. But still, I always felt immersed by the fact that I could impact the world enough to gain a title like that, even if it doesn't change anything about the game. Now that I've become a mayor and an owner of a women's refuge, it's time to find my mother, who should be proud of me. You learn that the archaeologist was captured by Jack and is being escorted to prison, and you gotta rescue him to find out how to sneak into Bargate prison where your mother is held. Here you are introduced to Jack's minions, which are the most powerful of the sword fodder you fought so far. My weapons were not initially strong enough, so yeah, this took forever and lots of hits, and when you get to the final area of the quest, you're under a time limit that I messed up the first 2 times, causing me to restart the quest. One of those attempts, I was late by 1 second, and I was furious. The archaeologist then tells you there's a secret ancient path to Litchfield Graveyard. Once you arrive at the graveyard, you meet the man who runs it, who very loudly states his intention that he's stealing Nostro, the old hero who's buried here's armor, to sell. The path to the prison is through a demon door who will only open at the request of Nostro, whose ghost will only do so if his armor is returned to his tomb. So you have to dig graves and fish and fight undead until you get all the pieces, and boom, the door will open where you can fight more undead, and then some more undead, and now you can fight undead in a circle, and then now you can go to the prison path, where you will find more undead and prison guards. Once you make it through, you find your mother, older, beaten down, and wearing her iconic armor still for some reason. You can start your prison escape, but Jack will stop you and now imprisons you too. You wake up in your cell, and the man in the cell next to you explains every year that you're only freed from your cell once, in an event where you race everyone and the winner goes to the warden's office where unspeakable things happen. Of course, I'm an elite world-famous hero. A race is nothing to me, and I win, and the unspeakable act is just him reading horrible poetry about Lady Grey that he wrote. You have to sneak and get the code to his diaries, one of which will contain a spare key to the cell. You can't win the first time, and you always get sent back to your cell for another year. I do like the way the developers try to convey the passage of time in Fable. Your hair and beard gets longer, and your appearance older as you play, and it increases tenfold when you jump a year like you did here. Rinse, repeat the race and bad poetry, and this time I get the key and start a little prison break, allowing everyone to leave after I get my items back. We backtrack through the hidden path again and fight a giant kraken this time, which is easy enough. Once escaped, your mother tells you to find a key that's crucial to finding the Sword of Aeons that can only be accessed by your bloodline while she looks for your sister. The key is located in Hook Coast, a wintry location far away from the mainland of Albion. You can get to Hook Coast by opening an ancient Collis gate in Darkwood, and once you're there, you find the abbey where the key is located is blocked off with a shield. Your mother then sends you a distressed message, and you go to Maze's quarters to find her being taken away by Jack's minions. She tells you not to forget the book, which is a book that tells you how to create and destroy the fields that are put up in Hook Coast. After you grab the book, you're hit with a point of no return message, though you can return to the side quest later, so don't worry about this. When you return to Hook Coast, the Guildmaster takes down the force field, and you find Maze with your sister trying to get the key. He makes excuses before realizing that the jig is up and that he has been working for Jack of Blades the entire time. He uses your sister to give the key to Jack, and now you must fight him after she uses all her strength to free you. During the fight, he talks about how he was weak for letting you live, and that nobody can beat Jack because he's too powerful. You fight him throughout the town, and he's a tough fight. He has strong attacks and often puts up a shield that you have to wait to lower before you can do any damage to him. And when you beat him, he says that maybe he was wrong to have lost faith in you, and that you are strong enough to beat Jack. And he dies at peace with himself, finally. But now time is of the essence, because Jack is opening up focus sites around Albion using the key Maze gave him, and you gotta stop him before he gets the sword. You go place to place, meeting all the other heroes you encounter to try to stop Jack's progress, but as you arrive at each focus site, they activate and Jack taunts you. I love the blood red hue of the sky and how urgent this mission feels. It's one of the best set pieces of the game. It's a good time to get any last minute experience, so take advantage of the respawning enemies, because the fight ahead is tough, and if you're already a strong boy like me though, you can just run past everyone. Eventually it is too late, and you must go to the guild and take Jack on yourself. You arrive and he's torn up the place and wounded the guildmaster. When you enter the chamber you graduated from, he's waiting for you and kills your mother to get the sword, and now you must fight and avenge her. He's tough. The first stage is fighting him close up, which is pretty easy, but his second form is where it gets really tough. He has these ridiculously strong ranged attacks, and the only way to avoid them is these stones that are put around the chamber. But, of course, he's also sending his minions at you to flush you out of those, so you can't just hide behind them the entire time. If you've been mostly sword focused this entire time, you can't use your sword at all, so you must have some skill and will or bow to damage him, which is why the game conveniently leaves a decent bow right outside the fight. With enough shuffling, you can eventually avoid both the minions and the attacks, and eventually I beat him, and he fades into the void and leaves behind a portal where Teresa reveals the choice she had been seeing for a long time. You can strike her down and become as powerful as Jack, or cast the sword and its evil away forever in the portal. I, of course, cast the sword away because I'm such a great guy, and that's it for the original game's story. But the game continues after in the Lost Chapters. The Lost Chapters was developed over a year and includes some fun changes. More armor, weapons, spells, more silver key chests and demon doors, the whole Bordello quest mentioned earlier, as well as a proper epilogue expansion. It's not really an expansion since it was only released as a complete solo package together with the original, since it's made up of ideas that were cut from the original in the first place. This is the definitive version of the game. There's even some development diaries, which are funny mainly because they're agonizing over portraying the Sword of Aeon's power. Now, let's take a little break from the story and have a love and real estate intervention. I mentioned earlier that you can marry people in Fable, and here's how. Your smooth, buttery voice repeating, "Hey."
Hey.
Flexing a lot and giving random gifts results in a big heart over a lovely lady or lovely man's head. After the meter fills up, you can give a wedding ring, and boom, you're married. What does this give you? Well, the ability to do some dirty time, but if you visit them frequently in whatever town you've married them in, if you give them gifts, they will eventually give gifts back, and they're pretty useful, either some strong potions or armor or weapons. Of course, to marry, you need a home, which every town has one that you can live in or rent out to become a truly powerful landlord. Now, if you're an evil man, you can kill the owners of every home and shop in every town, and buy the property out and rent it all. This is truly the most realistic part of Fable. Is it useful? Yeah, because money is always useful in Fable. Is it funny? Yes, because causing a housing crisis is hilarious. Anyways, brief intermission over, it's time to talk about the Lost Chapters. A year after the events of the first game, you receive a message from an old, mummified-looking hero, Scythe, who reveals that there are powerful enemies in the Northern Wastes, and evidence of Jack of Blades' return. He implores you to meet him there to help. To get there, you need the Fireheart, a big, bright, magical light that pulls a ghost ship that will take you to the Northern Wastes. Briar Rose will be assisting you for much of this quest, but she was always so smug in the original game, outside of a side quest where she is impressed by you. And now she treats you like a demigod, which you basically are at this point. The Fireheart is behind a demon door outside of the guild, and once inside, you have to win a little puzzle multiple times to free these weird old blue keepers of the Fireheart. Turn all the tiles blue, and they are freed. Turn them red, and you kill them. Either way, you get the Fireheart, and you can travel to Hook Coast to put it at the lighthouse. Of course, since you aren't a sadistic bastard who kills your sister for power, you might not have an elite sword to face these new, powerful enemies. Well, don't worry. The game gives you a good guy sword of Aeons. This is a weapon that Maze was researching, but realized he could not acquire, as he was not seen as worthy by those who hold it. But the good news for you is that sacrificing the original sword makes you worthy. Now that you're sufficiently powerful, you can travel to the Northern Wastes. You go to Hook Coast to light the lighthouse, which requires you protecting it from a bunch of enemies while it charges, and boom, a ghost ship appears and takes you to the Northern Wastes with a nice long beard. Now you can open the Cullis Gate, meet up with Scythe and Briar Rose, and discuss your plan. Now you have to activate the all-knowing oracles, which have been out of commission for centuries. Luckily, all you have to do is dig up some glyphs from at this place called the Necropolis that was once a thriving city that was cursed by a man making a deal with demons. This part is annoying, as every time you dig for a glyph in the 30 graves, you most likely will get an item that causes a bunch of enemies to appear. Now you're forced into a bunch of annoying combat situations just to find 4 glyphs. This is some proper quest padding if you ask me. To get the final glyph, you have to fight a snow troll, which is annoying but doable, and now you can ask the Oracle all sorts of questions. The first of which is, how do I get to Jack of Blades, and how do I destroy him? And you have to lock him away in his mask and destroy the mask. I, of course, love the lore dumps, and you can learn a lot from the oracles, much of which is tongue-in-cheek, but here you can learn that Maze was actually saved by Jack of Blades as a kid, and he owed a great debt to him because of that. You also learn that the previous guild regime tried to ban evil quests, which caused Maze and the guildmaster of all people to topple it. Scythe then chose the guildmaster to lead the guild because he saw the wise man he would become. And most interestingly, you learn that Scythe is thousands of years old and might be William Black, the first Archon. Which means this corpse is your great 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 grandfather. Pretty wild, isn't it? Anyways, to open the door Jack is sealed behind right now, you must gather the souls of 3 heroes. You have multiple options for it, which is a lot of fun. The good route is dead heroes, like fighting in the arena to get one of the souls trapped there for the King of the Arena hero, with Jack doing announcing and generally being pretty annoying. The heroine, which will be your mother's ghost in the Oakvale graveyard, and Nostro for the oldest soul, which requires you beating him in Litchfield graveyard as he wants his soul to be vanquished honorably. Now if you're ready to be evil, you can kill Thunder, Briar Rose, and the Guildmaster respectively, which is really cool that you have the option to kill such important characters. Either way, once the souls are captured, the door to Jack's location will be open, and holy smokes, he's a dragon now. And he's legit tough. His attacks can drain your health in one hit no problem, and my health was maxed out. Luckily, I am very powerful, and my multi-hit spell drained his health insanely fast. All I have to do is hit him with my bow while he's flying, and finish him off when he lands again, and you suck and swallow his soul with the mask and are tempted to wear it. If you do nothing here, you will put on the mask and become Jack of Blades, with an instant change to completely evil alignment, or you can cast it off, vanquishing his evil from the world forever. After you watch the credits, you can continue to play, finish off side quests, become a landlord, and that's basically it. There's no real endgame outside of those tasks. So yeah, that's the entirety of the story, and I've basically covered every mechanic of the game. The version I imagine most of you will be playing is Anniversary Edition, which I didn't choose for my first playthrough because I wanted a bit of a nostalgia trip with the old graphics. Anniversary is worth playing though, otherwise. The graphics, while losing a bit of charm in my opinion due to the 2013's obsession with murkier muted colors, are nice and helps the game look a little less aged, even if I do prefer the old ones. The new save system removes like 90% of the frustration the game gave me during quests, and also the sound is so much better in Anniversary. The original does not do well with the spatial audio of most new computers, and characters will stand right in front of you and you will only hear them faintly in your right ear. Audio is often clipping into each other, and it can be kind of a mess.
Blade and his men. She began a new life of servitude.
And a lot of that is fixed in Anniversary. The only real downside is that the menu system is pretty horrific. Why is everything divided into 50 submenus? The game was already made for consoles. Why did they make the menu worse? Unfortunately, outside of these quality of life fixes and a worse menu, there's not much different from the original. They didn't even fix many of the bugs that were in the original. So it's a half-measured remaster, but it's decent and worth it if you want to revisit the game on a modern system. Fable is an interesting game, and I enjoyed revisiting it, even if some of the luster was lost when I started to see the game's flaws that I didn't as a kid. The combat is lackluster, but the rest of the game is so full of interesting ideas, I can't help but admire the attempt of introducing more player impact on the world they play in. It was a great idea worth pursuing, and I do think a lot of it is not as impactful as it could have been. The immersion of moral acts affecting the world around you is cool, but ultimately lacks impact outside of the major decisions and quests. Looking good and evil based on your choices is cool, but is fancy window dressing. The game still plays the same, even if it does a better job of immersing the player, which I guess is admirable. To be fair to Fable, though, the morality system as a whole is a big iterative step over the last time it was attempted in Black and White, where being good just made the game harder, and being evil made the game easier. So I suppose I'd take the fancy window dressing and big decisions over a morality system that is imbalanced in the main quest and only changes textures. Of course, such ambition wasn't behind closed doors, and people started to get annoyed at the hype when the game was released without many of the features promised. While I think getting annoyed at a lack of growing trees and carved letters is frankly silly because who cares, that wouldn't change the game, yet people still talk about them when they talk about Molyneux and his lies. I think promising stuff like an open and lifelike world and children that you can play as when you die was a horrible mistake. Those aren't little gimmicky features like acorns growing into trees. That's an entirely different game. People feel lied to even if the intention was to feature those things like that. Even if the cold, harsh realities of video game development resulted in a change of direction. People either don't understand the business or just get frustrated on the principle that they're generating hype based off these features, and it should be based off what's definitely going to be in the game, not your highest ambition. While I think small features are not worth ripping him to shreds over, I can't fault the logic when it comes to massively scaled down ambitions like that. There was enough criticism levied at Molyneux that he had to post an apology on the Lionhead forums, where he basically said, "I'm sorry I made you feel that way," at the reviewers and players. Typical. The at-large reception for Fable, though, was very good, with praise at its combat multiplier system, which I don't really know what game this guy was playing, but I'm glad it didn't feel tedious to him and that he had a nice time. The game was also praised for its story, world, music, and sense of humor, which I can get behind. The main criticism of a short plot was addressed in the lost chapters, though I do think it's telling that Anniversary's reception was muted due to the game showing its warts, and while its innovation may have charmed the reviewers when it was released, I would say it has not aged as well as I would have hoped. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good game with a lot of charm, and this version of Albion for now is my favorite version that we've gotten in the series. Though, to be honest, it's been a while since I've played the other games, so stay tuned, maybe I'll have my mind changed by then. This was an active time for Lionhead. If you count Fable and the Lost Chapters, they released 3 full games in 2005. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at a game I have found to be an unappreciated gem, the sequel to Black and White. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far in. If you liked it or found it interesting, share it with a friend and click all the nice algorithm buttons. If you hated it, I'm surprised you lasted this long, but you can hit the dislike too for all your efforts. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.